All right, everyone, welcome back into another props video. Going to be jumping into the top prop bets on Prize Picks for week 1 of the NFL season. Let's go ahead and get into it. So as I am recording this video, you are going to notice that we aren't getting the full amount of games for week 1 just yet on Prize Picks. But I do want to go through game by game and give you guys kind of my breakdown of the expectations for those games. And the way I'm going to do that is by using DraftKings, their DFS platform, to go game by game, but also showing you guys the updated 9 to 5 Sportsbook tab available on 9to5sports.com, which I'm very excited to show you guys. But first, before we get into that, I do want to call it that, yes, I am recording this more than a month away from the start of the season. The reason why I'm doing that is because I do think we can gain an edge on Prize Picks and then later on Underdog as well by doing it earlier. The nice thing about placing these prop bets on Prize Picks and Underdog as well is that if a player potentially gets injured, that player will just be listed as a DNP. There's not too many negatives for the most part by doing it earlier. There might be some negatives by kind of waiting for news to come out, because right now we haven't seen Prize Picks really adjust their lines too much based off of the early camp news that we have gotten. I did want to call that out. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So we are not getting any prop bets just yet for the Pittsburgh-Atlanta game. That might have something to do with really how the Atlanta offense is going to function with Kirk Cousins as their quarterback. But also you got to think about Steelers as well. Is it going to be Justin Fields or Russell Wilson as their quarterback? We don't really have those answers just yet. Probably going to be Wilson, but we'll see. So we jump into this next game. We got Arizona versus Buffalo. And so let's go ahead and look at it from Arizona's perspective. So just looking at the depth chart right now, I mean, nothing too crazy. Everyone is expecting James Conner to be the starter there at the running back position. Really the biggest question mark that we have receiver-wise is going to be how Marvin Harrison is looking. And will it be Zay Jones on the outside or Michael Wilson on the outside? And if so, will Greg Dortch be the slot receiver? So we really don't have that many question marks in terms of the depth chart. In terms of injuries as well, they are pretty much good to go as well. We look at the game total for this game. What we're going to notice is that when we look at the game total, it is going to be 47.5. I guess 48.5 as well on DraftKings. So a decently high scoring game. Arizona is expected to be underdogs here by around 6.7 points there. And so we kind of get the expectation that Arizona might be playing from behind. Now, again, that could all change depending on maybe how the Bills' D looks and stuff during preseason and whatnot. But we look at the 4 prop bets that we are getting here, it would suggest that maybe we'd want to chase some more of those potential passing targets that are going to be available in this passing game, given the fact that they may be playing from behind. Now, I don't know if we need to do that. We do see that we are getting maybe a slight edge on Underdog for James Conner rushing yards. And the thing with James Conner is he is someone that when he has gotten the work, he has looked good. And we saw at the end of last season, even after coming in off of an injury, they really started to use him a ton. They really love James Conner a lot. The Arizona Cardinals do. He's their leader for them. So when he is available and healthy, he's going to get a healthy dosage of rushes. And so I wouldn't say pay too much attention to this projection too much. That's based off of last year's data and everything. That'll be updated by week 1, probably a few weeks before week 1, probably 3 weeks. But the point still stands. If we're just using last year's data, hey, you should be able to crush that. If we look at the DVP, the Buffalo Bills averaged 81.94 rushing yards given up. And so that's where I'm looking at the two differences in the lines. I probably would want to be favoring more of the underdog line to bet the over. In terms of Prize Picks, we probably don't need to be touching that. We look at Kyler Murray with his pass yards. We're going to see that this is probably the correct line across the board. Now, quite clearly, the Cardinals made a point of emphasis to make their passing game better by drafting Marvin Harrison. They're going to have a healthy Michael Wilson. They're going to have a healthy Trey McBride. And also Greg Dortch is seemingly going to be the slot receiver there. Again, we don't know if that's going to be Zay Jones or not as well. The reason why that's important is because all of those players, maybe besides Greg Dortch, are going to have time to build that chemistry up with Kyler Murray. And so if this were a choice between do I think Kyler Murray is going to get over or under his passing yards, I would want to favor more of his over. I don't want to touch these rushing yards ones, especially for the first week. Again, that could change through with how preseason looks, but I don't want to touch that. And then Trey McBride as well. Personally, I don't feel the need to go on any Trey McBride props as it sits right now. This is something that maybe given some preseason football, we could see what happens. Is he still the top pass catcher in this offense, or is it being spread out between some of those other pass catchers, Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson, and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr.? That is all stuff that I do think we'll be able to tell given some of the preseason work that we get. But because of that, we don't want to touch those props, maybe besides James Conner over his rush yards on underdog, and then potentially Kyler Murray, game script wise, betting his over passing yards. So then we go ahead and jump on into the Buffalo Bills, and we notice we are getting 3 different props. We are getting some decent prop line differences there as well. Let's start out with James Cook. So James Cook is someone that really looked good at the end of the season last year. Once they made the offensive coordinator switch, we saw James Cook really just get unleashed, if you will. The touchdowns were still down, but the touches, the playing time, and the production was all up. Now he's going against the Arizona Cardinals defense that did struggle last year, giving up almost 120 yards per game rushing. And if you look at it, they did bring in Ray Davis as a running back who reportedly, as I'm recording this, hasn't looked as good as maybe I would have thought. I do like Ray Davis. But again, kind of looking at this game, it is about a 7-point spread in favor of the Buffalo Bills. They might choose to, just kill the clock, assume that they are going to win by a touchdown with James Cook. And again, on the tail end of the season last year, we did really see James Cook get a lot more work rushing the football. Now, again, if I had to choose, I probably would be going with his over here, rush yards. But I just don't feel the need to go on that too much. But I do think they are going to try to rush the football a little bit more now that they got rid of Stephon Diggs. Now, they did bring in Keon Coleman, but we saw last year with someone like Dalton Kincaid that it did take a while for Dalton Kincaid to get going as well in this offense. And the biggest question that we have is, was his production spike literally just due to Dawson Knox being out during that time that Dalton Kincaid was successful? The data would suggest that. And really a lot of the offseason reporting would also suggest that. But now you take Diggs off the field and you do get the sense that Kincaid is going to be split out a little bit more, and they might just have Dawson Knox on the field a little bit more as well. Technically 12 personnel, but they're going to treat Dalton Kincaid really as just a slot receiver. We did see that a decent amount last year, and I do think we could see that again. I don't want to guess on that role. I would actually favor probably more of the under here. Now, it is a good matchup seemingly against Arizona, but I just don't want to touch that. We look at Josh Allen as well. We are seeing a decent prop line difference for his passing yards. He should be able to take advantage of this matchup. At the same time, again, I probably just don't need to go on this one too much. Now, I am a little bit shocked that we are getting prop bets for this Tennessee versus Chicago game because there are a lot of question marks for both teams. Look at the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, they're bringing in Calvin Ridley to hopefully create a better passing game. And they also brought in Tony Pollard, who is basically the same running back as Tajay Spears. And then obviously on the Bears side of the football, they have Caleb Williams. How is he going to play? We'll have those answered, or those questions hopefully answered during the preseason. But also, what's the chemistry like with someone like Keenan Allen, who's in his first year there? And is it going to be Rome Odunze instantly as the receiver number 3 in this offense? Or is it going to be the guy that's getting a lot of hype out of camp right now, Tyler Scott? Tyler Scott was the receiver number 3 last year as well. We could actually see that happen as well. Now we go ahead and take a peek at this game right now. And again, the depth chart doesn't really matter too much right now. I don't need to spend too much time on that. But looking at the injury report, is there anyone like too banged up? I will say right now, the fact that they do have some of their linemen banged up, that was their weakness last year. A lot of Bears fans would argue that's why Justin Fields struggled last year. That is definitely a concern. Will they be able to protect their quarterback? We're going to see that this is projected to be a low-scoring game as well. Chicago Bears are actually favored to win by 4.5 points, but this is a low-scoring game. 43.5 is going to be the game total. So we are getting 2 prop bets here for the Chicago Bears. We got Caleb Williams passing yards. Again, I don't really want to be targeting this too much. I do somewhat expect him to struggle, per se, in week 1. Just given that this is going to be his first start in the NFL, and given the fact that it's a low-scoring game. And so I'm probably just not touching that one. And then also looking at DJ Moore as well, we know that he did average over that yardage total that we're getting for his prop line of 62.5 receiving yards. But reports are that Caleb Williams and Keenan Allen have a great rapport going right now, that they hung out a lot during the offseason. And I'm going to assume that DJ Moore has that going for him as well. I don't want to make that assumption that he doesn't, but that might play a big part into it. DJ Moore and Keenan Allen are a little bit of the same receiver where you're going to work the football to them. They are both going to be 2 players that command targets. It'll be super fascinating to see what teams choose to do in terms of defensive attack against the Bears, who they actually treat as the receiver number 1 in this offense. That as a football fan, I'm extremely interested in. Like in season-long leagues, everyone's drafting DJ Moore to go first. They probably should be. We know Keenan Allen's injury history, but it wouldn't be surprising for the first month, maybe 2 months, to see Keenan Allen be the receiver 1 in terms of production, because maybe DJ Moore is getting a little bit more defensive attention, which is a good thing for Caleb Williams. Again, for week 1, I don't really want to be targeting that. And so we jump into the Tennessee Titans. Looking at Will Levis. Now, Will Levis is someone that came in and looked kind of like Baker Mayfield. I think it's the best way you can describe it. Where in the right system, maybe can be productive. I think he's maybe more Sam Howell than he is Baker Mayfield, where Sam Howell we knew was just a backup quarterback, where Baker Mayfield's on that borderline. The point is he plays like those two guys or somewhere in between. Now, obviously, the Titans got rid of Derrick Henry. So we are probably going to see Will Levis throw closer to 35 plus times per game rather than the 17, 28, 26 times they threw some games. And so if we're looking at it, I really think that this the lines that we're getting on both Underdog and PrizePicks, we should probably be chasing the over with this. I know the tag says under, it's 50%, whatever. Again, we'll have a better indication of what to do with that once we're getting sports book lines in there and everything. But that's why we're going to get an edge on some of these. I think this is one that we're going to get an edge on. Will Levis last year really didn't have a good offense, especially in terms of passing production. You add in Tony Pollard, who in ways could open up the passing game just by his dynamic playmaking ability. The fact that he's not one-dimensional. Tajay Spears, we know, is not one-dimensional. Very good as a receiving back. You add in a healthier DeAndre Hopkins and DeAndre Hopkins that's going to have more chemistry with Will Levis this time around. And then you add in Calvin Ridley, who apparently is going to get used like Cooper Kupp. Jamar Chase. That's the report. He's going to get used like Jamar Chase. And that should mean that Will Levis is having a good passing game. So I really don't mind the idea of betting him over, for his over of 214.5, especially given the fact that they are projected to be playing from behind. Now, 4.5 points, I probably would want to take the Titans there, but that's not what this video is. Now, we go ahead and jump into the next game. We got the Patriots versus the Bengals. And because we don't really know anything too much about the Patriots offense, besides Stevenson's going to be the RB1 there, we're not getting any prop bets for them. That makes sense to me. We are getting some prop bets for the Bengals, which Burrow is seemingly going to be healthy enough. There are questions about his health, longevity-wise and everything, but not longevity-wise, but just coming into the season, maybe not as healthy, but he's not on the injury report to start. That is very big. Okay, last year we know that he was dealing with some of those injury concerns. We look at how this game is projected to go. Very low game total as well, relatively speaking. I assume that's because of New England. Pretty good defensive team. A team that is probably going to try to rush the football, whether that's Jacoby Brissett or Drake May at quarterback. That is what we can expect. Looking at the game total, they are 9.5-point favorites. So that probably does tell us maybe we want to be attacking the rushing game. The biggest question that we have is which running back is going to be leading that rushing attack. And to me, this is where we are going to get our biggest edge. Right now, we are getting some bets for Zach Moss in terms of rushing yards. I don't expect him to be the running back number one. Actually, a lot of the reports that have been coming out have been suggesting that Chase Brown is actually the RB1. He has been running with the first team at least. Now, you might say that he's running with the first team right now because he has been on the team prior. You got Zach Moss, who was an off-season addition. That can be true. But you look at who is the more dynamic playmaker, it is Chase Brown. You look at who's more of a consistent producer, that's Zach Moss. I do expect this to be a 1A, 1B situation. I'm just very curious as to who they would go to in a 9.5-point victory, 10.9, whatever, based off the Vegas spread. And so again, I kind of think the better edge is looking at something like Underdog betting the under. Literally, my two favorite prop bets are an Underdog, and this is a PrizePicks video. It is what it is. But I do think that rushing out as under is the way to go. I do expect this to be more of a two running back system. At the same time, we haven't really seen that happen from the Bengals. They really just deployed Joe Mixon a lot. So maybe it is just a one RB system. Maybe they like that continuity. And at this point, it does seem like that would actually be Chase Brown. That running back would be Chase Brown. So I really like the under that we're getting on Underdog. 68.5 seems to be a massive outlier. And if you look at it, New England's a pretty good defense as a whole. And let's face it, the Bengals passing game is the most intriguing part of their offense. Now, I do worry that Zach Moss is the guy that could potentially be the closer. It's kind of what he's good at doing, is getting that extra yard. Whereas Chase Brown, more of a big playback. It's kind of like, I think the best example almost would be, it's a bad example, but I'm a Packers fan, would be like Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams when they were with the Green Bay Packers. Or even to a lesser extent, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery last year. Something like that. I do like the under. I think that's one of the better bets, but again, that's going to be an Underdog. Now, looking at these other prop bets that we are getting, I don't think I want to touch them. I really don't. I worry again about this New England defense. Pretty strong defense. I don't mind Jamar Chase to have a good game, but really what I want to see from the Bengals is who they're actually going to deploy in their passing game. In general, you got Yoshiva, who is looking like the receiver number 3. A lot of people are trading Jermaine Burton as the receiver number 3 right now. I wouldn't argue with that if anyone was presenting that to me. I just want to see that play out. I think it's going to be Andrea Yoshiva. Is it Yoshiva or Yoshivas? I never get how to say it. Yoshi, if you will. He has looked good. He looked good last preseason, looked good at the end of the year last year. They clearly like him. He's going to be the receiver number 3. And we still don't have the good feeling around T. Higgins. He is someone that could have a slight injury pop up, and I think he might sit out because he wants that big, long contract. I just don't think the Bengals think he's worth that, and I personally don't think he's worth that as well. And looking at it from a passing side, I think Tanner Hudson is the best pass-catching tight end for the Bengals. Now, they probably won't need him because they're going to be playing with the lead. We're probably going to see more Mike Gesicki, but I do think that's interesting. I did think that was worth pointing out. Again, if I had to choose, I probably would be going Jamar Chase for over his receiving yards because I do think him and Joe Burrow are going to hit the ground running. Joe Burrow over 250.5 passing yards. I'd be okay with that over as well. I just don't think we need to go there just yet. So let's jump into the next game. And this next game is certainly going to be an interesting one. We have the Houston Texans versus the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, it's Anthony Richardson versus CJ Stroud. That is extremely fun. And obviously, the Houston Texans, everyone is excited about them as a team this year. Basically, the polar opposite of last year. You got Joe Mixon there, who they just signed from the previous mentioned team in the Cincinnati Bengals. Then you have Stephon Diggs there, recently acquired. I do kind of expect him to be a little bit of the alpha male in there, if you will, start the season. Tank Dell, I do expect to take some sort of a drop. He's not going to have those big spike games, I don't think. But certainly, you can make the case that there's too many mouths to feed in Houston. And then you look at the Colts. Healthy Jonathan Taylor heading into the season without any contract issues. They acquired Adonai Mitchell, who looked good in college. Josh Downs is healthy. And Anthony Richardson is healthy as well. I did think it was very interesting to hear the quote that their offensive coordinator said, or that their coach said. I forget which one it was exactly. But he pretty much came out and said, you wouldn't let Steph Curry only take 2-pointers or something like that. It was like, basically, you have Steph Curry, you're going to let him shoot 3-pointers. You have Anthony Richardson, you're going to let him run. And obviously that was in regards to, will you try to limit Anthony Richardson in the rushing game? They basically said, no, that is his game. We're going to let him do his game. That's why we drafted him. And so just looking at it from an injury side, they are banged up. They did acquire Cam Akers. You have Andrew Beck, who is kind of their fullback tight end. They actually have Brevin Jordan trying to take place in that role. Apparently, he's had a good camp. And then obviously Joe Mixon should be good to go for week 1. If he's not, they do have Damian Pierce there. Like, I don't think we're too worried about that. We look at the game lines. I'm actually extremely interested. Two-point spread. Okay, very interesting. So the Texans are favored to win in this game. That's a little bit surprising that it's not bigger, just given the hype that they are getting. And it is a decently high-scoring game, but definitely some different lines there. William Hill, 46 for the game total. And the highest one, BetMGM at 47.5. Almost a little bit of an arbitrage situation there. Interesting. But we look at the prop bets that we are getting here, and this could be a situation where we might have a little bit of a potential to maybe gain an edge. Maybe Joe Mixon does come into the season a little bit banged up. I don't think we need to be betting on that just yet, but if he is, they might try to limit him. And I'm not saying that they're going to. And I really don't think Mixon's the best. I think he was in the best situation he could have been in, and he's going to be in another good situation here as well. Personally, this isn't a spot where I feel like we need to go crazy with it, though. This is a spot where I do think we just kind of let it play out. Now, yes, I do expect CJ Stroud to have another good game or a good season. That is a decently high prop line difference, though. 5 passing yards. It might not seem like a lot, but it is. And so I did just want to point that out to you guys because maybe not an elite matchup, but not a terrible matchup there. Colts give about 244.5 on average last year. But if you want to bet the over, obviously you'd want to do that on PrizePicks. If you want to bet the under, you'd want to do that on Underdog. Now, looking at the pass catchers, I did mention I do think Diggs is going to kind of step up and have a very good start to the season and then maybe tail off. Now, at the same time, they do have playoff aspirations. They could potentially do a little bit of what, and I don't expect this, but they could potentially do a little bit of what the Chiefs did last year, which was in some ways limit Travis Kelce, where they might maybe do that with Diggs, say, we're good with Tank Dell having a big role. He's younger. Let's do that. And Nico Collins, who they recently paid. And I do think them paying Nico Collins was a sign that they do think he is going to be the guy there. Now, that to me kind of leaves Tank Dell as the player that we really just don't know what his role is going to be, which is annoying for me as a Tank Dell guy, as someone that was hyping up Tank Dell this time last year. I know he helped me in a lot of best balls. I know he helped a lot of you guys in best balls as well. I don't like that. I don't like that that's my feeling for Tank Dell. The issue that I have with the Texans as a whole, though, it really seemed like it was one or the other type situation, and then you add in Diggs and another capable running back with a Dalton Schultz there that's going to be healthy and having a little bit more chemistry. I do worry about Tank Dell's role on a per game basis when we don't know what his role is going to be exactly just yet. Obviously going to be a slot guy, don't get me wrong there, but who will they choose to get the ball to in manufactured situations? I think that'll be Diggs. I personally do, but you never know. So this is probably more of a spot where right now I just don't see that much of an edge. And so let's take a peek at the Colts. Now, looking at Jonathan Taylor, he is someone that we're getting basic lines on him right now. Now, you do got to remember that they really don't have a backup there right now. It is Trey Sermon and maybe Tyler Goodson. Trey Sermon's apparently going to be the backup running back there, but I think we're going to see Jonathan Taylor as a workhorse RB. And if you look at Jonathan Taylor's production last year, he had a massive game against Houston in Week 18 last year. Obviously didn't play against them early on in the season. And it really is worth pointing out that that was without Anthony Richardson. And so that is the big question. That's the question I want answered during the preseason. What is this offense going to look like with both of those guys in it? We didn't see that too much last year. Now, we did see that Richardson was trying to rush the football a lot. Again, Shane Steichen was very vocal about they're going to rush him. They're going to use his feet. So in the games that he played and finished, 10 rush attempts, 40 rush yards, 56 rush yards. Against Houston, 3 carries, 35 yards, had a very big game, 2 rushing touchdowns there. And so although this is a very high rush total that we're getting, 42.5, right? That sounds crazy. You know, if I had to, I would be wanting to rush, pun intended there, I guess, run out the over. And obviously we're getting a decent edge there on PrizePicks compared to underdog 3 rush yards. I'd be fine with that over. And if we're doing that, if we are liking more of Jonathan Taylor rush yards and maybe Anthony Richard rush yards, you could also just run out the opposite of that. We see Michael Pittman Jr. 64.5 for his receiving total. That's a lot. That's a lot for maybe a run-first offense. And so I probably would be more inclined to bet the under for him and also probably just Richardson for his passing yards in total because he does seem like he's going to be more run-first. Then real quickly, I just want to make sure I didn't miss any injury news here. No, we are good with the Colts for now injury-wise. All right, so now moving into Jacksonville versus Miami. We'll start with Miami. No injury concerns just yet. Looking at the game total for this game, pretty high game total, okay? One of the highest game totals that we saw this for. 48.5 is going to be the average total there, and it is a 3.5 point spread. So no concerns about this game really being a blowout on paper. And so we get into these prop lines for Miami, and we're going to notice that we are getting an opportunity, if you will, to decide on whether we think the lines are too high or too low, depending on the site. If we want to bet the over or the under is what I should say, because on Underdog, it's a little bit higher for both Tua and Tyreek Hill, as I have highlighted here. I actually think the overs are going to be the option to go with on PrizePicks. I think this is a pretty good stacking opportunity that we have as well. So we take a peek at Tua. We're going to see the DVP is pretty much right on par with the PrizePicks line, which would suggest maybe betting the under on Underdog. But to me, again, I do think that the over is going to be the way to go. Let's just highlight Tyreek Hill as well. So again, very high scoring game. The line of 90.5, when we compare it against his average, is very low in consideration. And so this is not a terrible matchup for him. The question is, would you want to do Jalen Waddle as well? You could potentially do that as well, but I do think we have a good stacking opportunity to bet Tua for over his passing yards and Tyreek Hill then for over his receiving yards. I think that's a good stacking opportunity and really the only good stacking opportunity that we've had thus far. And I guess, if you will, we do know the narrative of Tua playing better early on in the season when the weather's nicer. Obviously, this game's going to be in Florida. In Miami, we shouldn't have to worry about weather being part of the narrative. So I will say another interesting opportunity that we have is with Christian Kirk with his over passing yards. Again, this could potentially be a shootout. This game has a chance to be a shootout. And if it does, Kirk could be someone that we're looking at to really go out and have a great game. We look at his yards per game last year, it was at about 65.6, which for the two lines that we're getting would suggest that it's already too low there. And I do want to point out the fact that they are going to be without Calvin Ridley there. And also Zay Jones. Now, those two players were replaced with Brian Thomas, who's a rookie, not expecting that big of things out of him right away. And then Gabe Davis as well, who last 2 years has really been a little bit hit or miss in terms of dependability. He's been a big play guy, which he will be good for them in that regard. Then you also have Parker Washington, who was good at times last year. Could be receiver number 3 or receiver number 4 for them. That being said, I think we're going to revert back to the Christian Kirk of 2 years ago, where he was a target-heavy player, and this line does seem to be too low. I think this is a great stacking opportunity for this game. 2 over passing yards, Tyreek Hill over receiving yards, and then Christian Kirk over his receiving yards as well. Then from there, I don't think we have to bet on ETN. They do want to limit his work. They've been pretty vocal about that. They wanted to do that last year as well. It turns out Tank Bigsby wasn't that good. They weren't able to do that. Thus, we saw ETN get a heavy workload, more than they planned for, and that really didn't work out for them. We'll see if that occurs again this year. And then Trevor Lawrence as well. He is so hit or miss. Sometimes looks like the next best quarterback in the league, and other times looks like Baker Mayfield, and just replacement level type quarterback. And so it's tough to trust him, really honestly, throw to throw, quarter to quarter, game by game. And so he is someone that I typically tend not to bet on, just because he is so inconsistent. And so with that, let's jump into Carolina versus the Saints. And the injury report that we're getting for the Panthers is something to pay attention to. Really, with Jonathan Brooks, is he going to be healthy and good to go for week 1? Probably not. It probably will be still a mixture of Chuba Hubbard, maybe Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders currently banged up as well, so we don't know what's going on in that running back room. The biggest thing that we need to note is really what's going on with their depth chart at the receiver position. We know they brought in Deontay Johnson to be that receiver number 1 for this team, and I think he will. I think he's going to be a good receiver number 1 for them. They still have Adam Thielen there, who was the receiver number 1 last year, looked really good. What are those 2 receivers really good at? Getting open and getting open early. And I think that'll alleviate a lot of the stress that Bryce Young had last year. The O-line is a concern, though, still as well. And then the question is, will Xavier Legette step up? Will Terrace Marshall step up? Will Jonathan Mingo step up? That's a big question. Like, who's going to be the receiver number 3? Will they step up? So we take a peek at this game between the Saints. A little bit of a lower scoring game. They are 5 or so point dogs in this game. The Panthers are not too much of a blowout concern there. And so we look at the prop bets that we're getting for this game. It is going to be Bryce Young and Deontay Johnson are the current prop bets that we have. And so, again, the biggest question is, will this passing game improve? And I do think it will. I think Deontay Johnson is going to be huge for them. And we look at what Deontay Johnson did last year with the Steelers. That was a poor passing game as well. You could argue maybe worse than what he's in now. He averaged 54.6 receiving yards last year, which is going to be a little bit lower than what his lines are on PrizePicks and Underdog. I don't mind that over. I think he's going to be someone I would rather bet on receptions wise. Very curious to see where those lines come out to be for him. I will be doing, obviously, probably a couple more week 1 videos. That'll probably be something I want to bet on more so with him. And then Bryce Young as well. Probably don't need a bet on him as well. The Saints are a tough matchup, only giving up 220 passing yards per game. I do think the passing game is going to be improved. You look at what he averaged last year, around 180. That's about a 20-yard bump from what he averaged last year. And again, I think this offense will be better. I think Deontay Johnson's a big upgrade for him. I feel like that's more of a wait-and-see approach there. So jumping into the Saints side of this, we are getting an interesting line on Alvin Kamara for his rushing yards. Now, I think it's interesting because you look at the DVP, Carolina gave up a lot of production to the running back position last year. They're one of the worst rush defenses in the league, but a lot of that was due to that's just how you beat them. You didn't have to throw the football that much. You weren't worried about the offense. You were just going to rush the football, not make any critical game mistakes that might cost you the game, and you were going to get the win. And so logically speaking, I do think the over here does make a lot of sense. At the same time, Kendre Miller is someone that has been getting a decent amount of hype out of Saints camp. He is someone that I kind of expect to take a bigger role. And I'm curious to see what the all-purpose yards, not all-purpose, but receiving and rushing yards are going to be for Alvin Kamara. That'd probably be the better bet. Now, Derek Carr, we look at his receiving yards line. This is a very low line. And I just mentioned that a lot of teams last year just chose not to throw the football against the Carolina Panthers. We didn't really get a perfect indication of how they were defensively against stopping the pass. Teams just more or less chose to run the football. And so this is a low line for, I would say, this offense for Derek Carr. At the same time, probably not one that we need to target. And so with that, we don't need to attack Chris Olave as well. All right, so we jump into the next game. We got Minnesota versus the New York Giants. And so we look at this game, and this is going to be another low-scoring game. The point total is about 41 points. Okay, you got to remember, Minnesota's going to be without Kirk Cousins, replaced with Sam Darnold. TJ Hawkinson, I'm assuming, is going to be out until at least week 7. I know the injury report is saying expected to return week 2. I don't know. I feel like that could potentially be rushing it. We'll see. But he's not going to be available for week 1, it seems. And then with Minnesota, you had the case of Jordan Addison. He should be good to go. I don't think he's going to get suspended, but you never know. He had like a DUI situation. And then you look at the addition of Aaron Jones. That is something noteworthy. Looking at it from the Giants side, injury-wise, nothing too much. Obviously, they got rid of Saquon Barkley. They replaced him by adding a bunch of positions throughout the offseason. They attacked a bunch of team needs, which I think is huge. The Giants, I'm laughing because I'm just thinking about the Giants offseason Hard Knocks, guys. I love that. If you guys haven't watched that and you guys have HBO, watch that. To me, that is the best version of Hard Knocks there is. I love it. I really do. Like playing Madden, I would enjoy the off-season stuff. I would simulate through a season. I love doing the off-season type stuff. So obviously that resonates a lot more with me. It was super cool to see them peel back the curtain a little bit there with the Giants. But also, they didn't really tell us too much about their team. They just have Devin Singletary there, Malik Neighbors they love. But for our betting purposes, I don't think we have a good tell on really what we should be doing there. Malik Neighbors, I tend to think that rookies are getting overvalued, and we already saw this offense with Daniel Jones. It's going to be very difficult for receivers to be productive consistently. So I'd be more on the let's bet the under here. And who knows? It's you never know with rookies. Like obviously we all expect Neighbors to be the receiver number 1 in this offense. Just when is that going to happen? Robinson is not a terrible receiver. And then they have a plethora of guys that could be decent. Apparently, Jalen Hyatt's been having a decent training camp thus far. So, there could be something there. I do think that Devin Singletary is someone that we're probably going to be looking at, okay? This is a low-scoring game, and it is a 1-point spread. So it's really not a game that we need to be caring about too much in terms of like stacking, but I do think Devin Singletary is going to get a heavy workload. Really like what he did with Houston at the tail end of the season last year. With Buffalo, he was a consistently good running back as well. In this game against Minnesota, he is someone that could just get asked to carry the football a lot. If he gets 16 carries, I do think he'll be able to get that over rushing yards. Minnesota last year was about a middle-of-the-road defense, but man, they already got banged up, guys. So some unfortunate stuff going on for Minnesota defensively. I do think that's going to create opportunities, though, for other offenses. Tyrone Tracy, I'm very interested to see Hard Knocks-wise if he gets a lot of love. I am recording this before the Tuesday of the conclusion of the draft, like all their draft picks. So I think he is someone that could get a lot of hype based off of that video. I'm very interested to see that because after that, they don't really have much. So I do think it's going to be the Devin Singletary show unless Tracy can prove something. I also think the Giants have the potential to sign someone off a team once they get cut from training camp potentially. Like a veteran that maybe is a surprising cut. Maybe the Giants jump on that. And then we look at the prop bets that we are getting for the Minnesota Vikings. And I am a little bit shocked at the line that we're getting for Aaron Jones. For his rushing total, 66.5, mostly because he is someone that the Packers were always hesitant to give a heavy workload to throughout most of his career. And I think this heavy workload was kind of the ultimate deciding factor as to why they were like, all right, we need to find a different running back. We overused him. They're just hesitant to use him. And I think the Vikings are conscientious of that. He is not a workhorse running back. Body-wise, that's just not him. And Minnesota, Kevin Stefanski, I should say, is very good at attacking a defense's weakness. Their weakness, the New York Giants, was definitely in the passing game last year. And so I think we'd be much better off looking at Justin Jefferson potentially for his over receiving yards. Now, I know last year when he came back from injury, he was a little bit more inconsistent, if you will. Obviously, without having Kirk Cousins there, you're going to struggle a little bit more. At the same time, they were able to find ways to get him the football. I don't think Sam Darnold's a terrible quarterback. I think Sam Darnold's going to be able to get him the football, especially in a good matchup. And so I do really like the idea of betting Justin Jefferson for this over line. This has the potential to be his lowest line of the year, and I think that's a line that we should be targeting. All right, and then we jump into the next game, the Raiders versus the Chargers here. We look at the game total. We're not really getting that many lines for this game just yet, but about 42.5, maybe 43. Going to be a close projected game as well thus far. Raiders injury-wise, at least right now, they're looking like they're going to be good to go health-wise. The biggest question for them really comes down to the quarterback battle. Is it going to be Gardner Minshew or is it going to be Aiden O'Connell winning out that starting position? And that really does become a big thing for Davante Adams. I think if Gardner Minshew does win out that starting position, we're going to want to be targeting Davante Adams for over his receiving yards. 69.5 is going to be a low number for him. And you look at what Minshew was able to do last year with Michael Pittman turning him into a borderline receiver number 1 in fantasy football. I think that does bode well with Davante Adams. And if you look at over his career, he has had a lot of bad quarterbacks play with him besides Aaron Rodgers. You look at the games when Aaron Rodgers was out, Davante Adams was still able to produce in those games. That happened again last year with Davante Adams. Obviously, no Derek Carr, was still able to put up 1,000 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. Was targeted heavily though. That's my one concern. This is apparently going to be a run-first offense as well as the Chargers, so it could be a game in which the clock is running a lot. Maybe there isn't a lot of targets out there, but if that doesn't occur, I do think this line that we are getting is extremely low for him, especially when you look at what he's done against the Chargers the last 2 times out. And then you add the narrative around Adams as well, where the Chargers were trying to talk crap about Davante Adams, and so he's going to be motivated to play well. Davante Adams motivated to play well. I'll take that over any day of the week. Again, kind of risk reward, because if it is O'Connell, I do think that hurts a little bit. If it's Gardner Minshew, I think that helps him a lot. And again, I know that this is a prize picks video, but real quickly for Underdog, we are getting a line for Zamir White of 59.5. I think we are going to see much more of a running back by committee out of this running back group. And so for me, when I'm looking at that, you got Madison Abdullah is still a capable back. And then you got Dylan Lube. I don't think that's how you say his name. Lub. Whatever. He is someone that apparently has been looking good in camp. They like him. I worry he's just kind of a fun camp person, if that makes sense, where it's fun to cheer for him, but at the end of the day, he's just not that good. But there's a great chance for this to be running back by committee. You look at the film from last year, Zamir White honestly looked just as good as Alexander Madison. The difference was Alexander Madison was being treated as a workhorse running back for a majority of the season, whereas you look at Zamir White, he was treated that for the last 4 weeks of the year. For whatever reason, fresh legs is a thing with running backs at the end of the year, and they look a little bit better than they typically are. I think that's the case with Zamir White, and I do worry that he is not going to be a productive running back or just a workhorse running back like a lot of people are thinking. So I do think that would be an under that I don't mind as well. So then we look at the Chargers. Injury-wise, they're going to be good to go. Like that there from them. Depth chart-wise, we do have a little bit of figuring out what's going to happen. Josh Palmer is going to be a starter. I think we know that. There's a little bit of word out of camp that maybe DJ Chark will be the outside receiver instead of Quentin Johnson. Fioco's a guy that's not terrible as well, just as an FYI. And then who's going to be the starting tight end? Is it going to be Will Dissly? Is it going to be Hayden Hurst? No clue. This is going to be a run-first offense, but we still really have no idea who is going to be the RB1, RB2, RB3, we have no idea who's going to be even RB5. This depth chart, I don't think is accurate. Let's just put it that way. Elijah Dotson's perfectly capable. Spiller, maybe he's decent. Vidal, a rookie. A lot of people are trying to hype him up because he's a rookie. We don't know. I would say I would rather have Dotson right now, like fantasy football-wise, best ball-wise, more so than Vidal. And if J.K. Dobbins is healthy, he might be good. We don't know. We have no idea about the Chargers. And so as of me recording this, I do not think we are getting any sort of edge at all. Okay? This should be a run-first offense. I mentioned that. That's what they want to do. At the same time, you're still going to be throwing the ball over 50% of the game. This does seem like a low number for Justin Herbert. The weakness for the Raiders, you rush the football against them. And so just staying away from the Chargers. I'm glad we're only getting one line for them. And so after that, we have Denver versus Seattle, another kind of interesting team. We really don't know who's going to be the RB1 for Denver just yet. Probably going to be Javonte Williams, but it could be Jaleel McLaughlin, P. Ryan maybe. Who's going to be the quarterback? Is it going to be Zach Wilson, the experienced kind of vet, if you will? Bo Nix, obviously they reached for him. They clearly like him. They want him to be the top quarterback, or maybe Stidham. I doubt it's going to be Stidham. Yes, I'd argue right now, if I was a Broncos fan wanting to win, I would say start Zach Wilson. It's crazy that they're basically the same age, and Zach Wilson has been a star in this league for a terrible offense and terrible scheme for multiple seasons. I mean, that's pretty crazy. But looking at the game preview here, we are getting some difference in the lines here for sure. Projected to be a low-scoring game, though. Injury-wise, Blake Watson, rookie, actually looked pretty good in college. Probably not going to play, so they don't need to worry about that. Adam Troutman, is he going to be ready? Is he going to be the tight end one for them? heading into the season? We don't know. And the only prop bet that we are getting for Denver is going to be with Courtland Sutton. 51.5 receiving yards does seem to be kind of low. At the same time, with the way this offense was ran last year, I think it's going to be even worse for the passing game. I don't really want to touch it. And so I do love the talent of Courtland Sutton. I would love to be able to bet this over. This does seem to be a low line. But given the uncertainty at the quarterback position and really the lack of talent at the quarterback position, just not betting that. And so we look at the Seattle Seahawks then. Health-wise, we shouldn't have too many concerns heading into week 1, which is great as it sits right now. Now, when we look at the props that we're getting for this game, or for this team, definitely interesting. So we got Kenneth Walker, rush yards. Gets a good matchup against Denver, at least from last year's data. Gave up almost 120 yards rushing last year. Look at Kenneth Walker. He was someone that last year averaged 60 rushing yards. The issue is that you have Zach Sharm there as well. Another year for him. Now, I personally think Kenneth Walker is much better than him, and I think they should treat Kenneth Walker as the RB1 there because of his talent. This is a new regime. I don't think they're going to want that type of runner that Zach Charbonnet is, okay? Kenneth Walker is much more of a decisive running back, much more of a playmaker as well. I would argue that we should be betting this over. I would argue that the reason why this is so low, though, is because of that uncertainty in the workload. Is it going to be a 60-40 split? Is it going to be a 50-50 split? We don't know that. I would bet it's going to be closer to 60-40, but we just don't know that. From there, we got Geno Smith. You could potentially run his over passing yards. This is relatively low, I would say. Then you also have DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, I like the over here. Last year, he averaged about 69.5 receiving yards, so at 61, that does feel to be a little bit too low, but I do think that the gamble that we have here in terms of potentially gaining a bigger edge by the time week 1 rolls around is going to be with Kenneth Walker over the rush yards. Again, probably feels like we're forcing that a little bit. All right, so we got 2 games left here. So Dallas versus Cleveland. Offensively, really no big worries for pass catchers. I mean, Payne Hendershot, maybe we could take away a couple of snaps from Jake Ferguson. I doubt it. Looking at the game lines for this game, interesting here, guys. Wow. Okay, so interesting big differences here. So 46 for William Hill. Okay, and then we look at BetMGM 41. Big prop line differences there. This is a huge arbitrage situation where you're betting the over, and more of a middling, I guess, with the lines that we're getting there. Betting the over on BetMGM, betting the under on William Hill. The payouts are the same at -110. If you guys are someone that has access to both of those sites, by all means, go for that. That is huge. That's why I am doing the game breakdown like I'm doing it here. That's a very good edge for you. And so we jump into the lines that we're getting for Dallas in week 1. Now, Cleveland was a tough defensive matchup last year. A lot of quarterbacks did struggle in that. Okay, we look at the average yards, 185. And I know Dallas's offense is going to be good again, or at least I fully expect them to. I think the best route would honestly be stacking the under here. I don't think this is properly valuing that Cleveland defense. And maybe I'm just overvaluing them. In terms of like fantasy football and season-long stuff, guys, I never like to put a lot into the equation for DVP, especially in season long. A lot of people like to look at strength of schedule for like a player. Oh, this player has the best strength of schedule. I think that's completely dumb, honestly. We see a lot of teams get better throughout the offseason, and then they prove that in the preseason. The preseason is very telling for which defenses have improved, whether that be because of philosophy, more players in there. We can tell a decent amount by preseason. And so that's why I'm more or less just highlighting the bets where I think we are gaining an edge on, especially compared to what the line could be in week 1. I did want to make that point because that Cleveland defense could end up just not being as good as they were last year, potentially. At the same time, given these lines that we're getting for the Cowboys, no need for us to go crazy with that. And so we go ahead and jump on into Cleveland. Obviously, their injury report is kind of crucial that they are so banged up right now. Offensively, Jerry Jeudy's always been someone that's consistently on the injury report. It seems like you got Jerome Ford currently questionable. We're expecting these guys to play. Again, this is a month away. Not too worried about that. Nick Chubb, will he play? That's a big question, though. Okay. Deonta Foreman is someone that could end up in a massive role for Cleveland, potentially for maybe a couple of weeks. Now, I will say the lines that we're getting on Deshaun Watson do seem to be vastly too high. This game, I just think Vegas is kind of all over the place right now, especially given the game lines. Now, Amari Cooper's lines being this low are definitely interesting. Like, I expect him to have a good game. Obviously, going against his former team, I don't think there's any sort of revenge narrative that we can write into the equation, but it does seem to be too low for him. He's a guy that obviously has consistently proven that he still has the talent. It's just whether Deshaun Watson or not does. That's the biggest question. If I had to choose, I would go Cooper over, maybe even Deshaun Watson under. And then let's jump into the last game that we have during this video breakdown. We got the Washington Commanders versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And so looking at the game preview here, again, another close scoring game, as you would think they all are, at least for week one. Low scoring game though as well, relatively speaking. 42 is going to be the point total or so, 42.5 on average. So I'm just going to pair these two teams together right now. Looking at Baker Mayfield's prop line for his passing yards, it's definitely interesting with Baker Mayfield. He is someone that just threw the ball up a bunch to Mike Evans, and it ended up working out majority of the time. That's more of a testament to Mike Evans, I think, than Baker Mayfield's play on the field. I don't want to sound like I'm hating on Baker Mayfield. His stats did not match the film, if that makes sense. I kind of expect him to regress. I kind of expect teams to figure that out. Will it happen in week one? It's tough to say. I would rather bet Mike Evans for his over receiving yards on Underdog. That 3-yard difference could end up being huge, especially if you were to stack that with Baker Mayfield for his over. I don't mind the idea of doing that. This game could be sneaky good. You look at the Washington Commanders, they're going to have Cliff Kingsbury as their offensive coordinator, which a lot of people didn't like him as a head coach. I kind of get that. But if you look at what he did for Kyler Murray in his rookie season, that was kind of huge for Kyler Murray. And that whole offense was good. Hollywood Brown had one of his best years. I kind of expect Terry McLaurin to have one of his best years as well. I would argue that this line that we're getting for him is going to be too low. That's assuming that Jaden Daniels is looking good, though. I do think it's worth pointing out for receivers, these two matchups were two of the easier ones throughout the year last year, especially with Washington. They were a very easy matchup. So, again, kind of echoing Mike Evans on Underdog for his over. I like that. Then Rachaad White. I'm definitely interested about Rachaad White in terms of like preseason production because he is someone that, again, last year, through a majority of the season, you're watching film, you're like, this guy just isn't it, but he kept producing. And then maybe towards the end of the year, it actually started to look a little decent. It was a weird thing, kind of got better as the season progressed, which typically does not happen. I am very interested to see how Bucky Irvin looks this preseason. I think he is someone that could end up maybe being a little bit better than people thought. Maybe White gets a little bit of his workload taken away. But if that doesn't happen, guys, Rachaad White's rush yards here are definitely too low, 64.5. He only averaged around 58. Okay, I get that. The matchup is purely a matchup thing. It's vastly too low. And he should have the trust of the offensive coordinator, Baker Mayfield, as well. So I could see betting the over here. I don't think it's a must bet, though. And so with that, let's go ahead and get into my favorite bets for week one as it sits right now. I will be doing another Underdog video as well. Just want to call that out. Now, before I get into that, I do just want to call out the 9to5sports.com website. You guys, we're seeing all the tools that are available on the website. Well, there's going to be many more. There's fancy golf tools out there. There's prop tools for PrizePicks and Underdog, as well as sportsbook tools for MLB and NFL as well. Go ahead and head on over to 9to5sports.com. Sign up for just $10 a month. All right, so again, I want to reiterate that we are getting, I think, better edges on Underdog right now. I am going to be doing that video a little bit later on, hopefully when we get some sportsbook data in the next week or so. At the same time, I made it clear which bets I like for Underdog. There, again, getting slightly better edges there. But I wanted to keep this video a little bit shorter. Obviously, this is a very detailed video, so I didn't want the video to be vastly too long. And so with that, these are the 4 best prop bets I like currently on PrizePicks. Will Levis for over his passing yards going against the Chicago Bears. Now, I do like the Bears defense. They are solid. At the same time, this number does seem to be a little bit too low, especially in a game where they are projected to lose and projected to be playing from behind. You tack on the fact that this Tennessee offense should be better for passers with the addition of, well, Tony Pollard instead of Derrick Henry. And then you got a healthy DeAndre Hopkins, as well as now Calvin Ridley. I think that's huge. Devin Singletary is somewhat of a matchup-based thing, but at the same time, I think he's going to be someone we can count on to somewhat be almost a workhorse for the New York Giants, at least early on in the season when they are, hoping to make the playoffs still. He is someone that looked good last year, forced Dameon Pierce out of a job almost, and he's taking over for Saquon Barkley. They might want to put a point of emphasis that they made the right decision, and going against Minnesota, that's going to be huge. Another maybe somewhat narrative-based play is going to be Devontae Adams for over his receiving yards of 69.5 going against the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, there was a little bit of an off-season clipboard material, I guess, if you want, for Devontae Adams with the Chargers, where he's basically going to be motivated to play well against them like he did the last 2 times last year. I do think that this is a little bit predicated on Gardner Minshew being the quarterback. I think Gardner Minshew is a little bit more prone to just land the ball fly. And Gardner Minshew has proven that he's very good at getting the ball to his receiver number 1. We saw Michael Pittman have a great year last year. Now this last one, Kenneth Walker, I tossed in there. It was a bet that I had already made when the lines originally came out. I think it was at 57.5 for him, which I thought was way too low. Still at 60.5 rush yards. I think that's too low. I'm betting on the fact that Seattle is going to be like, all right, yes, he is our best running back. He might be our best playmaker on offense. Obviously, a lot of people like DK Metcalf, but you guys get the point. He is a huge part of this offense. Treat him like such. And he also gets a good matchup as well. Now, I do want to point out that when I say matchups, that is based off of last year. The preseason is going to be telling as to whether those matchups that we would want to exploit last year are still going to be there this year. I want to point that out. This is very much trying to gain an edge on what the week 1 lines are going to be next year. But that is all for this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It is a preview for the week 1 slate that we have. Obviously a month away, a lot can change, but I appreciate you guys being here. Good luck on your week 1 props. Stay tuned for all the coverage that we're going to have throughout the preseason as well. Thanks for watching. As always, let's keep cashing.